So, this past October, a massive teacher strike brought schools all across Alberta to a complete stop. But after 22 long days, this thing didn't end with a deal or a handshake. Nope. Instead, it ended when the government dropped a devastating piece of legislation that instantly shifted the whole landscape. And in doing so, it kicked off this huge constitutional battle over what our rights really mean. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It leaves you asking, how is it even possible for a government to just turn off a fundamental right, a freedom that's written right into our charter? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack here. Just look at this timeline. It shows you how incredibly fast everything went off the rails. What started on October 6th as a pretty standard, though large labor dispute over things like pay and class sizes, well, it morphed into a full-blown constitutional crisis in literally a matter of days. By October 28th, Bill 2 was pushed through, teachers were ordered back to work, and a legal firestorm was officially lit. I mean, this statement from the Alberta Teachers Association really tells you everything you need to know about the stakes here. You can feel the shock. Teachers saw it as more than just the government making a tough policy call. This was a straight-up attack on democratic principles. Teachers went back to work, but made it really clear that just because they were complying didn't mean they consented. Okay, so to make sense of this whole tangled mess, we're going to borrow a really simple but powerful framework from political scientist Jared Wesley. It boils this entire debate down to just 3 questions. Can they do it? Must they do it? And maybe the biggest question of all, should they do it? So let's start with that first one, from a pure black and white legal point of view. Can a government actually do this? And the answer lies right here, in this incredibly powerful and frankly controversial part of our Constitution, Section 33, which everybody knows as the Notwithstanding Clause. You can think of it as a constitutional escape hatch. It was designed to give elected governments the final word if they get into a major disagreement with the courts. But man, every time it's used, it's explosive. Now, it's not like it's a magic wand that can erase the whole charter. It can't touch democratic rights like your right to vote. But, and this is the crucial part, look at what it can override. Fundamental freedoms, including freedom of association. And why does that matter so much here? Because back in 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada itself confirmed that the right to strike is protected by that very freedom. So the short answer to can they is, legally speaking, yes. Governments can generally invoke the Notwithstanding Clause. Whether the government can do it in the way that it did with teachers, this is something the Alberta Teachers Association is challenging. And that brings us to question number 2. Did they have to? Was this their only move, or was it a deliberate political choice? So, think of it like there were 2 roads the government could have gone down. On the left, you see the road they took, use Section 33, impose a contract, and basically try to shield that decision from a charter challenge in court. Then there's the other road, the more commonly traveled one using Section 1 of the Charter. That's the Reasonable Limits Clause. It still lets the government limit rights, but, and this is a big but, they have to go to court and prove that the limit is justified. That path almost certainly would have led to binding arbitration, not a government-imposed contract. So what's the bottom line here? The government did not have to use the Notwithstanding Clause. It wasn't a last resort. It was a strategic choice. A choice to try to bypass the courts and force through a contract that the teachers had already said no to. And that, of course, brings us to the final, and let's be honest, the thorniest question of them all. Just because you can do something and you choose to do it, does that mean you should? This is where we move out of the legal weeds and into a much deeper debate about democracy itself. From the teacher's point of view, the answer is a clear and resounding absolutely not. In their court challenge, they called it what it is, an abuse of power. They're arguing that this powerful Constitution tool wasn't used to protect kids. It was used to win an argument and crush, a legitimate, lawful strike. Now, for its part, the government's official rationale was all about creating stability. They argued that the strike was just too big, too disruptive, and that their main job was to get students back in the classroom. Period. That was their justification for taking such a drastic step. So, where does all this leave us? Well, the demonstrations have ceased, and teachers are back in schools. The strike may be over, but the fight has just shifted into a new arena. It's transformed into something much bigger, with consequences that go way beyond Alberta. And you know, this didn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, look at this table. The Notwithstanding Clause was once seen as this break glass in case of emergency tool that you almost never use. But lately, it's becoming a go-to tactic for provincial governments all across Canada when they hit a wall on major policy fights. And yet, for Alberta, this moment was still historic. They'd tried to use the Notwithstanding Clause before and failed. But this was the very first time an Alberta government actually managed to pass a law using it. And that's a huge shift in the province's entire political and legal landscape. And really, that's the key takeaway here. What started as a fight over classroom resources and salaries has now ballooned into this huge fundamental debate about Canadian democracy itself. It's about the balance of power between our elected governments and the constitutional rights that are supposed to belong to every single one of us. But just recently, this debate got even more urgent. The Alberta government introduced a new bill, Bill 9, invoking the Notwithstanding Clause a whopping 3 more times. This isn't just about labor rights anymore. It's about fundamental charter protections for trans people, including children. The changes would override existing court challenges to laws that limit gender-affirming healthcare, require parental consent for students to change names or pronouns in school, and ban trans girls from participating in female sports. This move makes the stakes much higher. It's not only a constitutional power play, it's now a direct confrontation with the rights of some of our most vulnerable citizens. Which leaves all of us with a really big, really tough question to think about. The whole point of the Notwithstanding Clause was to make sure that in the end, our elected politicians have the final say. But when that final say means they can just suspend our fundamental rights, who's left to hold them accountable?